I grew up in Great Falls, Montana. I had a wonderful family with great parents, and I had an experience that happened when I was 7 years old that really altered my worldview. I got sick with the measles, and I was really ill. My parents had made a bed for me upstairs on the couch so that I could be near their bedroom. I had overheard them talking about the plan for me, and the plan was that the next day I was going into the hospital and I was going into something called an oxygen tent. But something amazing happened that night. My parents came into the room. Everyone else had gone to bed. My mother said to my father, she said, "Honey, will you kneel down by the couch with me and will you pray for our boy so he'll be able to get well?" And so they did. They kneeled down by the side of the couch, and my dad starts praying. Now, knowing my dad, it was probably the first time in my life that I'd actually heard him pray out loud. But they were very concerned about me. And as he was saying this very heartfelt prayer, I had a change that happened in my body. It started at the top of my head, and it went whoosh through my body, and I was healed instantly. Now, to go from being really sick one moment to being completely well in the next instant, it's such a remarkable, impossible thing that you don't ever forget it, no matter how long you live. And I remember it like it happened yesterday, and it was many years ago. So I held my tongue until my dad was done praying, which didn't take long. And when he was done, I said, I'm better. I feel completely fine. And they said, "Well, that's fine. Go back to sleep now. Tomorrow you're going into the oxygen tent." And so, but the next day proved it that I was better. So what I learned from that was that there is a higher power that we can draw upon. I really internalized that, and I thought about that a lot. Well, fast forward about another 7 years, and I ended up developing kidney disease. I started getting these pains in my back that got worse and worse and worse until suddenly they reached this unbelievable crescendo where these pains would put me on the ground or just take my breath away. It was like being run through with a sword or something. And my parents were very worried. They took me to see some doctors at the hospital in town. And they ran these tests on me, and they said that I had kidney disease, that there was nothing that they could do. I was either going to get better or I wasn't. And if I didn't get better, then I wasn't going to survive because you can't live without kidneys. And they didn't do kidney transplants back in those days. But there was nothing they had to offer. So my parents decided they would take me to see some alternative doctors. And these doctors practiced out on the edge of town in an old trailer house. And so I started going to them, and it was about as big of a contrast as you possibly could have found between this very expensive clinic where I'd been diagnosed and this trailer house out in the middle of a muddy field where these other doctors were working. But these doctors seemed to know exactly what I needed. And so as they were working with me and working on my body, I started feeling better right away. And within a few weeks, my pains were dramatically better, much less frequent, much less severe. And in about a month, I was feeling completely well. And so my parents took me back to the clinic where I was diagnosed, and all the tests were rerun. And as I recall, they actually ran the test twice, and they said, "Well, it's a spontaneous remission. Whatever we did must have worked." And they hadn't done anything. And I knew in my heart that these other doctors had really helped me. And so that's when I decided that's what I wanted to do with my life. I wanted to become a natural sort of doctor and help people naturally, because that's what they'd done for me. I've thought about that a lot over the years. And initially, when I went to chiropractic school and I became a chiropractor and I went into practice and I was working with people, I thought, yes, this is true. This is a sacred calling. I'm helping people to get well. Anytime you're trying to help someone function better, help their body work better, or help them to feel better, help them to manifest more life, you're doing a sacred thing, because I believe that the body is really a temple. But that wasn't the end of it. As time went on, you see, because I had learned that there's a higher power we can draw upon, I got in the habit when I was in practice, when someone would come in to see me, before I would do a treatment on anybody, I would pause just for a moment and just silently ask for help from up above, from that higher power, from God. I did that for 17 years in a brick and mortar practice, every patient that I saw. And then for about 2.5 years in a distance practice, it was the same thing. No one ever knew that I was doing that. It was a totally private, totally personal habit, but I was asking for help from up above. And I'll tell you something, I know for a fact that that higher power is aware of what we're doing all the time, because there were occasions where somebody would come in to see me and I didn't know how to approach their problem. I didn't know how to help them. And I would offer that silent prayer for help, and the information about what was going on with them and what I needed to do and how I needed to look at their situation. And that information would sometimes just flood into me like an avalanche of data. It's just an incredible thing. That didn't happen very often. Usually we get information from up above in the form of a thought or maybe an impression or an idea. That's how my practice was. During the last 10 years that I was in practice, most of the people that I saw had been told there was really no help for them at all, no cure for them at all. And yet, I was able to help almost all of them because I was tapping into the subconscious mind of the individual and I was asking for help. And I've come to the conclusion that the highest duty of the healer is to act as a go-between for that higher power. So when we try to help someone and heal someone, if we don't ask for help from that higher power, whatever you believe that higher power to be, you are really shortchanging yourself because you're missing out on the ability to get that information and that data and that power behind you, that power that created everything and that keeps everything working. During the years that I was in practice, I was really obsessed with getting to the underlying causes of people's problems. I had no interest at all in giving people a Band-Aid sort of remedy. I wanted to really fix them. And as a holistic doctor, which is really what I was, I didn't have the license to give people medication to suppress their symptoms. I didn't have a license to do surgery on anybody. So I was left with this dilemma really of having to figure out what was really wrong with people. The beauty of it, though, you see, is that within each one of us, we have this subconscious mind. And the subconscious mind is vastly intelligent, more than we can even comprehend. That's the part of you that is creating millions of new red blood cells every minute. It's the part of you that can take a ham sandwich and can convert that into new cells and new nerve cells, new muscle tissue, and so on. So it's an order of understanding, really, that a level of intelligence that we don't really understand. We haven't really even scratched the surface. But what I found is that I could tap in easily to that subconscious mind within each person and ask questions. And the subconscious was very willing to give those answers. And so as time went on, I found that the single biggest common denominator for every patient that I saw, no matter how young or old they were, no matter what their condition was, whether it was a mental or emotional or a physical problem, they all had something in common, and that was what you might call their emotional baggage. And really, to understand emotional baggage, you have to understand the body itself. If you look at your hand, for example, your hand looks pretty solid, but if you were to magnify your hand enough, eventually you'd be looking at an individual atom. And if you were to look inside the atom, you'd see there's really nothing in there, just empty space and some infinitesimally tiny energies that are zipping around at the speed of light. We live in this illusion that these bodies of ours are solid, but they're not really. They're more a force field than anything else, right? And so that's really what we are. We're beings of pure energy. So what I found is that when you're feeling an intense emotion, because every emotion has its own vibrational frequency, what's going on in your body on a quantum level, when you're feeling an intense emotion, is that your whole body is taking on this emotional vibration of whatever that emotion is, frustration or anger or resentment or grief or whatever. And it's during those times, typically, that if that emotion is too powerful, some of that energy becomes trapped in the body. And so we call that a trapped emotion. And this is literally what our emotional baggage is. So there were many situations that happened to me over those years where I learned how powerful this emotional baggage is. One of the very first people that I actually treated that was a very powerful experience for me was a woman that came in to see me who thought she was having a heart attack. She had crushing chest pain, difficulty breathing, left side of her face was numb, her left arm was totally numb, and this had been going on for about 24 hours, getting gradually worse. Well, it looked like a heart attack to me. I told my staff we might need an ambulance. Luckily, we were very close to a hospital. But I did some testing on her very quickly and found